Can you not find them? You're not alone. It's difficult to identify the ancestors when we go far back into our tree. As a matter of fact, that's been the majority of my professional work, trying to identify those people in the early 1800s, 1700s. It's just tough. And so I did a number of videos years ago where I talked more about how to identify those parents. And I wanted to repurpose it because I think it needs to be viewed again. And I actually compiled a couple of videos together so that you can see some different strategies. We're going to be talking about the initial steps that you take as you are working to identify a parent of somebody born pre-1850. And you're also going to learn about certain record groups like probate records and deeds. And so we're going to talk about all of that in this video. This is like kind of a mini class of these initial things that you have to do when you're doing this type of research. Now, I've got to warn you, I did these videos a while ago, and I am one who is constantly changing my hair, if you haven't already noticed. So you're going to see a lot of styles. Anyway, I hope you enjoy it. Oh, before I forget, I wanted to let you know that there is a handout for this video. It is available on my Etsy page, or you can be a member of Amy's crew this month and you can get the handout for free. So anyway, you might want to check that out because that will give you the step-by-step if that's helpful for you. So I'm using red and yellow to rev you up, to give you the energy and strength that you need to find this family and to feel motivated, to feel like you can do it, because you really can. You don't need to hire a professional genealogist to do this in many instances, and you can do it yourself. All right, so here's an outline of the different steps that I take initially as I'm attacking one of these projects. And I'm going to go into each step in more detail. So the first step, your research goals. A solid research goal is really important. You want to create a research goal that doesn't bite off more than you can chew. And you want to have a research goal so that you don't go down all of these other avenues that have really nothing to do with what you're trying to solve. In this type of research, you got to stay focused. So you don't want to squirrel. You want to keep it straight, okay? And you need a solid research goal to do that. A lot of people kind of get intimidated by that and just kind of feel like it's unnecessary. But when you're doing this type of research, you just really have to stay focused. So you want a research goal that's specific and not too broad. A lot of times I have people that ask me to do a project for them that is really broad. And in this time period, I can't do that. I'm going to be wasting their money. I need to focus on one thing, and then I need to try to do that for that individual. And so it might be something like, I want to find the parents, or I want to find just the father of John Doe, who was born in 1788 and died in 1855 and resided in Albemarle County, Virginia. So that's the first thing that you want to do. The second thing that you want to do is you want to put the information into a timeline. And the reason that this is so important is timelines help you recognize mistakes that you may have made. And they kind of help your brain think through what was happening and where they lived. Because where they lived is so important right now. And Virginia won't cut it, okay? You've got to drill it down into a smaller place. Otherwise, it's way too much to bite off. So put your information in a timeline. Now, programs like Ancestry kind of naturally create a timeline for you. You can create your own, even more detailed timeline if you want to. It's really kind of whatever floats your boat, whatever works for you. I have done a separate video on timelines, and I actually have a handout about timelines. So if that's something that interests you, you can look at that. The other thing that I want you to do is include the siblings if they are known of the individual in question. Maybe you know the siblings and you don't know their parents and you think that's dumb. That would be impossible. If I know the siblings, I'm going to know the parent. But that isn't always the case. Sometimes siblings are known through family information, Bibles, things like that. And you want to put any information that you have about anybody that you know that was part of your family into this, so that you can kind of knit this family together and know all you can about them. And what you're really looking for is their earliest known residence, okay? That's a big part of this timeline. And sometimes that information will come from a earlier marriage record. Sometimes it may come from a death certificate or a death record. Sometimes it may come from family lore. And that is kind of something that we have to be a little careful of. But if that's all you've got, you got to look at it. And then other times it may come from a family Bible, which is a great thing to have. So in this instance, I have Mary Ann Milloway's exact date of birth, and I have that from my family Bible, but I only know that she was born in Virginia. So I have to go to her marriage. So that's the first known place where I kind of have a record of knowing exactly what county she came from. Now, the one thing that I will tell you is that you want to expand a little bit more than just that county, because sometimes people lived maybe nearby another county and it was actually a shorter distance to go to the other county to get the marriage license than it was to go to their own county courthouse. And you might want to be paying attention to rivers and mountains that lied between where your family lived, if you know more specifically where they lived and where that courthouse was. So those are the types of things that you want to be keeping in mind. Like I said, this isn't easy, but it's doable. Now, marriage records. And I'm using marriage records plurally because there are almost always more than one record. They may not have all survived, but there were many records that were created. And I want to show you an example of this. Okay, this is a pretty cool example. Okay, so this first record is a statement made by a pastor who said that he married all of these individuals in the last little over a year. Okay, and that's just really common. And they'd go and they'd report this to the county clerk. Another reason why you sometimes want to look at the surrounding counties as well. So that's one record. And that's great. I have William O. Harris married Mary Ann Milloway on November 9th, 1837. Great. And I know that this record came from Albemarle County. So I have that record. I have their marriage record, right? No, you want to keep looking. So I dug around a little more. And I found additional records for Mary Ann Milloway. I found their marriage bond. Now, a marriage bond is a common marriage record in this time period. What it was two individuals would post a bond, and it usually was a significant amount of money, stating that they wanted to, that this man and this woman wanted to be married. And basically what they were doing were saying that they both had the right to be married. They weren't previously married. They weren't trying to do something illegal. And it gave people the opportunity to refute the fact that this couple could be married. But people that were willing to put up some hard money, and a lot of these bonds were for, like this one is for $150. In 1837, $150, that's a lot of money, right? So the people that are going to be posting this bond, they have a vested interest in this, and they're not going to post the bond without some assurances that this is what should be done. And so oftentimes the people that posted the bond were the groom and then somebody from the bride's family. And in this instance, we have William O. Harris, the groom, posted the bond along with Garrett C. Mahanis. So I have a bond. Is that all that I need? No, there's more. And in this instance, I want to show you why it's so important to look at all pages of a record. If this came up on I'm looking at microfilm and this came up on my microfilm, oh cool, I got it. No. I want you to look at the pages before and after it, okay? Because there's always more than one record. For instance, this was the page before. So this was actually the back of that page. This was at the beginning. And so then I have the bond, and there's actually a clue at the bottom of the bond, but sometimes that clue isn't there. So just if you don't see something like that, it doesn't mean it's not going to be there. But it says here that there was an affidavit made by Isaac Milloway. Check this out. So I have this affidavit, and what do I see? I see a statement that was signed by witnesses that Isaac Milloway and Judith Milloway gave permission for their daughter, who was not a legal adult, to marry. Oh my gosh. But life isn't usually this easy, all right? Normally, you don't find a record in the marriage record that gives you the name of the parents. It's great if it happens, but it doesn't usually happen. So our next step is a census evaluation. Now, a census evaluation involves going in and finding all of the individuals that lived in a particular place by a surname. And in this instance, when you're doing the search, less is more. I always start with the clean census search. Let me show you how I do it. If I'm doing it in Ancestry, which is where I perform my census evaluations, I don't know, it just works better for me, but you can do it in any of the websites that you're involved with. I go up to the top and I go to search. I go to a census and voter list search, and then this screen comes up. And all I'm going to put in here is Milloway in Albemarle County, Virginia. See the little checkbox below? I want to stick to that exact county and adjacent counties. I'm not putting in first names. I'm not trying to get tricky. I want to see everybody that lived in that county by that name. Now, if you have a really common name like Smith, it's going to be a lot harder, and you may need to kind of change up your strategies. But in many, many instances, especially during this time frame, this works. It's been very, very rare that it's been more than I could handle. So then I have a results page, and often I'm going to have a lot of results, but that's because I'm looking at all census records. And I don't want all census records. I know Mary Ann Milloway married in 1837. So her family maybe lived there in 1830 or 1840. Now, she wouldn't have been in the household in 1840. She would have been in the household of her husband. Probably, right? But so I want to look at all the Milloways that resided in that county in 1830. And if your marriage was closer to the census, like in 1831 or 1832, that's even better, okay? So when I do the census search, I use those filters there on the left on Ancestry, and every website has filter places, so just find them, okay? But I use those filters and I go to 1830, and I just select the 1830 census. Then I'll make a list of all of the individuals that resided in 1830 that had a child that was of the appropriate age to be married, if I have a lot of results, okay? And I want to maybe be a little loosey-goosey with this because ages aren't perfect in census records. So you don't want to be so rigid that you avoid looking at somebody that might be really helpful to you. I then take that information and I kind of mind map or create family groups. And you can do it however it works for you. Now, I've got a couple examples here. I have like a mind map thing where you're looking at all of these different things. Personally, for me, it's too messy. It's too much. My brain can't process it. I want to see things more linearly. So I will then start making family groups, and I'm going to look at them over various censuses. Now, this is a table that I created for a different family, but this is an example. So I found them in 1830, and I kind of wanted to see what happened with this family over a period of time. So I found them in all of these different census records. Maybe I would look in 1810, maybe I would look in 1820, but I want to kind of work out this family. And then I will start naming the individuals in the family as I find other records. Like this is a good example of this. So I have Gilbert that was born in Massachusetts, and Eliza, his presumed wife, who was born in Connecticut. And then I have some unknown males and females that were found in that census record. And I keep track of them and their ages at that time. But then if you see that I have Franklin, who was born in New York, who was under 5 in 1830, and he wasn't named. And he was between 10 and 14 years of age in 1840. But then later on, he's with the family in 1850. And so now I have his name or his probable name. And then I can kind of work to name the other children. Now, maybe I'll name the other children through some of the other records that I'm going to talk about in a minute. But this helps me start ruling out families. This helps me look at families, and if I can name all of their children and my person that I'm looking for isn't in there, then I know that most likely my person wasn't the daughter of this man. Do you see what I'm talking about? I'm starting to pull all of this together. And sometimes the way that I do this is I'll create kind of a fake ancestry family. Like in this instance, I created just a plain old Cheney, all right? I don't have any information for this Cheney. I don't really care. And this is best done in an ancestry tree that maybe is private, or I'll add a tag to them that this is a hypothesis, and maybe I'll even put in notes in there that I'm just researching. The other thing that you can do is do a floating tree, and there's videos on how to do a floating tree. But let me give you a little bit more example of what I do here. So let's say I know this Francis Marion Cheney. He's the person that I know who it is. He's the guy that I'm trying to determine his parents. And I'm running into these other people that may be related to him or may not. And so I've put them in as possible children of this plain old Cheney. And one of them was born in 1781. Is he really a brother of Francis Marion, that Francis S. Cheney? No, he's not. I'm just putting him in there to keep track of him and to give Ancestry hints and opportunity to maybe turn up some records that might make my life a little easier. But by doing my census evaluation, I know for sure who resided in that county. Now, one of the other things that's come up since I did this video is Ancestry's networks. Now, if you're using Ancestry, you can use the networks tool if you're part of Pro Tools to keep track of those individuals. But like I just showed you, you don't have to have it to do that, okay? There is a separate video that I have that I go into more details about networks. You can check that one out. Here's the thumbnail. I wanted to let you know though that that is another effective way to keep track of all of these individuals that you're looking at. So once you've kind of done this, you've done your census evaluation, you've taken a look at your different groups, you've either put them into a floating tree or you've put them in as fake siblings of the person that you're researching or however you want to organize it, I'm starting to dive into record groups. Now, what are some of the important record groups during this time period? We already talked about the fact that we don't have census records that name other family members. So what are some of the other things that you can look at that might identify your family members that you care about? Probate records. Probate records are the best, okay? And probate records oftentimes name family members, especially wills, right? They identify the people that somebody wants to bequeath their estate to. Great, yay, you find somebody in a will. But I want to explain a couple things about probate records, okay? This is a little probate 101, all right? We have intestate and testate. Testate means they had a will. Intestate means they didn't have a will. And a lot of people think if they died intestate, they didn't have a will, there's nothing to find and it's all over. Wrong! There's a lot more that you can find. And you need to know how to look for those intestate records. So those records can include guardianship records. They can include an appointment of an executor. And often the executor is a family member or a close friend. They might include the sale record. It include inventory of everything that person owned, as well as the people that purchased it, because it didn't work like it did now. They inventoried everything. And then the family basically kind of had to buy back the stuff. So I know it's kind of weird, but it's how it worked. And you need to understand that. So the people that attended and purchased the items from the estate either lived very close and were friends, part of your fan club, or they were family members. So those records can provide information. And then after all of that's said and done, the money that was accrued from the estate is then given to the beneficiaries. And sometimes there's record of that, and you want to know who those beneficiaries are. And you also want to know about what the laws were at the time and how the laws dictated who the beneficiaries were. Because remember, this is intestate, meaning they didn't have a will that set out that they wanted their property to go to so and so and so, okay? So this is all things that you want to be paying attention to. So when the colonies were formed, the laws were based on English law because that's where basically most of the people came from. So there's a few things to understand about English law, common law, as it is oftentimes called, and how that affects our wills and probates. So in common law, a woman could not own property if she was married. Her husband owned her property. And that sounds kind of harsh, which it was, but one of the things that happened, though, was that a woman had dower right, which meant that she was entitled, if her husband passed away, to 1/3 of his estate until she died or remarried. So, and sometimes wills will like delineate that, but sometimes they don't. And so it's important to know that fact because a woman could have gone to the court and said, regardless of what the will said, I'm entitled to 1/3, and it would affect the will. There were a number of states that were based more on French law, like Louisiana, and their laws are based on civil law, which is totally different when it pertains to women. So it does depend on what state you're in. Now, in a lot of wills, you're going to see somebody specify the name of a child and they give them $1. And that just seems kind of weird. But know that in England, that wasn't uncommon. They would mention all of their children and give them $1 so that way the will wasn't going to be contested and it was clear that nobody was forgotten. That $1 did not necessarily mean that they were kind of punishing that child. Sometimes it might have meant that, because one of the other things to consider in English law was that the oldest son usually received the majority of the estate. And so a lot of times fathers would provide, like for a daughter that got married, upon her marriage, they would provide her household items or land, or some of their other children land. So sometimes if they gave somebody $1, it was to note that they hadn't forgotten that child, but maybe they provided a gift to that child prior to the date of this will. And that's another reason to go look in deeds, because a lot of times that's where you'll see those kinds of gifts given within a deed record. It could have also meant that that person already had sufficient wealth and income. And so the father was deciding to, or it can be in women's cases as well, decided to give something to other children that maybe were more in need. One of the other things that you want to pay attention to are the witnesses of any of these documents. The witnesses frequently, particularly of the will, the witnesses were frequently neighbors because they asked somebody who lived nearby to come and witness a will. So when you're looking at that fan club, the friends, associates, and neighbors, you want to be paying attention to those witness names because they can give you a lot of information if you're not finding success in these deeds and probate records. The fan club can be extremely important. A couple of really important facts that you can obtain from a will are the date that the will was written versus the date that the will was submitted to the court. And that gives you the window of time of somebody's death if you have no other death record. And usually they died pretty close to the date that the will was submitted to the court. So that can provide great information when there's no headstone or no other death record, which when we're looking at this time period, frequently you're not going to find a death record. The other thing that's really helpful is wills very frequently provide the married names of daughters. And sometimes that is the only record that we have of one of the daughters' marriages. So let's talk about, where do you find these records? These records can be found usually on the county level. They're held in their county courthouse. And if you contact them, they can tell you whether they still have them or whether they were sent to a state archives or another repository. So you're going to be looking at the county level for these records. Occasionally, like in New York, sometimes they would hold some of these records on a township level, but most of the time you're going to find them on the county level. And you can go into the county courthouses and you can look at your documents. You can sometimes contact them and order them from them, but there's a lot online. And I'm going to spend some time talking about what you can find online. Now, when I'm looking for probate records, I like FamilySearch, okay? You can find some of them on Ancestry, and Ancestry has been adding to their probate collection. They do have some probate records that aren't on FamilySearch, but actually a lot of their probate records are actually from FamilySearch. So I start on FamilySearch and then I check out Ancestry too. But on FamilySearch, I want to go up here to the search at the top on the left and then go to catalog. And I want to put in that we're in the United States, in the state of Virginia, in Albemarle County. Once I select that, I see all of the records that FamilySearch has for that county. Boy, this is a goldmine. If you don't know how to do this already, you want to know how to do this. And then I'm going to focus specifically on probate records. You'll see those at the bottom, right there. You might also want to check out those guardianship records. That means that the person had children that were minors at the time of their death and somebody had to be appointed guardian. If somebody was under the age of 21 and their father passed away, they required a guardian. Even if their mother was alive, and again, this depends on the state and the time period, but they required a guardian. And frequently that guardian, if the mother was alive, might have been a relative of the mother. So if you have family members who were under the age of 21 when an ancestor died, you definitely want to be looking for guardianship records. Also know that in a legal document, if they called somebody an infant, that could mean that they were under 14 years old. So when we think of the word infant nowadays, that doesn't necessarily mean that they were really an infant by our terms, right? So keep that in mind, that a child that is 10, 12 could be considered an infant in some of these legal documents. So don't let that throw you off. If you go on to FamilySearch, and I'm not even going to sign in. You don't even need to for this part, but I'm going to go to search and I'm going to go to catalog, and I'm going to go kind of large to small. So I'm going to go Florida and I'm going to go Dade. And then I've got that right here, search, and then I'm coming up with all of the records held for Dade County, Florida that they have on FamilySearch. And right here we've got probate records. And look, we have 4 different kinds of records, not just wills. We have a register of wills, but we have a probate minute book. We have letters of testamentary and administration, and then we have estate files with an index. So these could all be valuable things. So if I look at these letters of testimony and administration, these are records that may have been filed for somebody that died intestate, meaning without a will, like we talked about before. So this would be something, if I don't find a will, I want to be checking this out. I'd like to point out that this is microfilm 1870455, but it's items 2 and 3. So if I click on that, if I were to look at the first item, this is marriage records. This isn't what I wanted. So I'm going to go back out further, and I'm going to look for the item 2 or 3. Here's item 2. And if I look at this book, this is the record of letters of testamentary and administration. Perfect. That's what I wanted. So at the beginning of this book, I have a little index. Voila, that's awesome. So let's go back to these estate files. So I'm going to click on this. And this is showing me an index right here to the different estate files. So if I click on this, I can look through this index and I can find whoever I'm looking for and see if they have an estate file in that county. Let me show you another example. Here we have Lawrence, Kentucky, Lawrence County, Kentucky. And here we have records for inventories, appraisements, guardian bonds, and administrator bonds. Sometimes you'll see guardianships up here, and it's alphabetical, so it would be under genealogy, like right here. Sometimes guardian records are found within the probate records. So you want to look in both places if you're looking for guardianship records. So this is all in one place. So if I go to this document or this file, it's going to start here with just loose pages. So there's no index to these records, which makes things really difficult. And this shows an appraisement of a person's estate. And I'll talk about who bought all of the different things that they appraised and for how much. And these are names that you want to be looking at because these are either neighbors or their family members. And so you want to be paying attention to the names of people that purchase stuff in an estate. So that can be very, very helpful. Let me go to one more. Here we have New York, New York. They have a ton of probate records. They have 32 different probate things. Some of these are books that people have written, and you can click on them and take a look at them. Some of them are the court records, the decrees on accounting, administrator bonds, estate orders. There are a ton of different records here. Now things have changed since I did this video at FamilySearch, and now they have what they call full text searching. And full text searching is amazing because it, as it sounds, fully searches all of the text. So you can find names that you may not find otherwise. Yet, I wanted to show you both methods because sometimes you kind of got to get in there and see what records are available. There's value in understanding both of these things. So I'm going to dive into the full text searching and how it pertains to probate records as well as deeds a little bit later. But I wanted to let you know that that is a wonderful tool as well. And you can also find records on other websites like Ancestry. So we're going to talk about some of that. I'd like to dive in and show you a couple of records and illustrate some of the things that I've just been talking about. So the first document that I have for you is a will, and it illustrates a lot of really great things that we just talked about. This is the will of John Fry. It was filed in Westmoreland County, Pennsylvania. Let's see, we'll look at the bottom of the will. The will was written on the 9th of January, 1809. But it was filed in the court on the 16th of September, 1819. So 10 years later, basically, this will was filed. So he probably died in 1819. So let's look at this will. In the will, there's a lot of times there's some pretty common language in a will, and I'm going to skip over a lot of that. I just want to point out a couple of things for you. He asked that a convenient time after his decease, his personal property be sold and be distributed as follows. He said his dear wife, Anna Marie, shall have 1/3 part of the whole amount of net proceeds. That is an illustration of dowry. And then he notes the children of my first wife are to have $1. Now again, he's mentioning each of them. But this will also gave us a clue then, right? So Anna Marie, his wife, is not his first wife. And this will tell me which children were from his first wife and which children were from Anna Marie. So he mentions all of his children by his first wife. His son John, his son Conrad, the children of his deceased daughter, Susanna, who intermarried with Henry Hoffert. So wow, a lot of information there. So we know he had a daughter. She married Henry Hoffert, and she had died before 1809 when this will was written. His son Philip, his daughter Magdalena, who intermarried with George Knopf. His son Jacob, his daughter Catherine, who intermarried with James Cogley. His son Frederick, his son Michael, and then he mentions to the children of his present wife, Anna Maria, shall have as follows. To his son George, in addition to what he has gotten from him already. So again, clue, I want to be maybe looking in deeds to find out more of that information. The sum of $74. To his daughter Salome, who intermarried with George Formeyer, the sum of $17.33. He notes that his plantation should be sold to its best advantage. So again, I have a clue. I want to be looking in deeds for this plantation. This will was witnessed by Simon Drum and Jacob Rieger and William Fried. So those are people that I would want to be looking at. Now, are there more probate records for Jacob Fry? Undoubtedly, and those would be things that we'd want to look for. Now, here is a letter of administration. The widow, Catherine Hoffman, was made the executor. This noted that he left no last will and testament. But again, we have an executor paper that named his wife. And if we didn't know his wife already, here we have it. So this is an example of somebody not having a will, but we still find a document that's very helpful in finding out more about his family. Estates were required to put a notice in a newspaper of somebody's passing, so that if anybody had any claims on the estate, that could happen before the estate was closed, just like today. So newspapers are something you want to be looking at when you're looking for documents for probate. Let me show you Ancestry really quick. So here is Ancestry, but this is will, probate, land, tax, and criminal records. So there's lots of things in here. You can search by last name and first name. Sometimes less is more, and sometimes just last name. If I know where I'm looking, I'll put that in first just to see what I'm finding. Usually what I just put in is a last name like Cross, and I'll put in a lived in place, and I'll put in let's say Dade County, Florida. And so it pops up right here, but I want to keep it exact to that county if I know for sure that they were in that county or county and adjacent counties. Those are the two search terms that I use the most often. And then I'll just click search. Sometimes wills are showing up now in hints on Ancestry as well. So here is a record of one that I just kind of came across on Ancestry of Richard Ivy Smith, which is kind of unusual because his residence is in Dade County, Florida, but his probate place was Rockingham County, North Carolina. Let's look at this will really quick, and I want to show you a couple of things. One, when I pull up this will, I'm seeing one page here, and a lot of people don't always recognize all of the pages before and after. So as I'm looking, and I'm going to get rid of this little directory thing right here, but as I'm looking at this will, I want to point out that you can move right here, right and left, and look at all of the various pages of this will, as well as some of the other information. Like here is the petition for the probate of the will that was then filed. The will was first, and then the probate of the will was after. So there's a lot of information that can be found in these places. It's not just a will. There's a lot of other records in here. So make sure that you look around and see all of the records. You can look around this like you're flipping through the pages of a book. So Ancestry is a good resource. My second favorite type of records to determine family members in my first initial steps of doing a research project like this are deed records. They are so underestimated, okay? People think I don't care about deed records. I am shocked at how many intermediate genealogists that have had some experience, that really have done some solid genealogy, don't know anything about deed records. So let me tell you how these work. Deed records were created when land was transferred. And there's a couple of things that can be in a deed record. One, a deed record can identify, and most deed records do, the county where the individuals that are involved in the deed reside, both the grantee, the person that is purchasing the land, and the grantor, the person that is selling the land. It'll note that where they live. This can give you patterns of movement, and it can clue you in to another place. Sometimes you might see somebody that received land for $1, and the relationship may be specified, or they may say, due to my love and affection for so-and-so. Another thing to be aware of in deed records, if you're searching in a slave-owning state, if you're in that time period where there may be enslaved individuals, they may be found in deeds as well. And then finally, like we kind of talked about before, in most of these states in this time period, women couldn't own property once they were married. So you want to be checking both maiden names, if you know it, and married names. Here's a great example of a deed. This is actually a deed from Thomas Jefferson, President Thomas Jefferson. It's in the second line there, in consideration of affection to my grandson, Thomas Jefferson Randolph. I've just identified a relationship through a deed. Here's another. This indenture made the 8th day of May in the year of our Lord 1815 between George Fry and Mary his wife of the one part. So another thing that a deed can do is it can identify the spouse, which in this time period can be super difficult to do. You may have identified the father of an individual, but you can't find the name of his wife. You might find it through a deed. Here's another one. Between Jacob Fry and Elizabeth, his wife, late Elizabeth Rudabaugh. That tells you her maiden name. Maybe you didn't know it before, and it was through a deed. This deed also specifies that he is disposing of 1 equal undivided 7th part of the whole of this property. That's a sign to you that this was inherited. So she and 6 other siblings or other beneficiaries received this land, and her husband Jacob is selling her interest in the land. And it gets even better. On the next page, it identifies this land that had been conveyed to Christian Rudabaugh, late deceased, one of whose children and heirs at law is the said Elizabeth. Sometimes deeds indicate military service. Sometimes deeds reference a land grant. Now, a land grant is different than a deed. A land grant is the original granting of a piece of property for either consideration of money or oftentimes service. And frequently that was military service. So if you see your ancestor obtaining a piece of property without a deed, they may have obtained it as a grant, and then later on, then they sold it. So that gives you one other place to look for your ancestor is in grants, and those are in separate documents. And sometimes different repositories hold those grants. That's the stuff of another video too. Sometimes things that we wouldn't even think of as a deed or a transfer of property can be found in deed books. All right, where do we find these wonderful deeds? Well, I gotta tell you, going into a courthouse and getting around those dusty books, I know that sounds gross, but it's true. It's actually fun. So if you have the opportunity to visit the courthouses where your family members lived, do it. It's great. It's a fun experience. And sometimes you can find information that you're not finding online. So most deeds are held in their county courthouse. And the other thing to keep in mind is that a deed is usually held in the county in which it was created. So if your family members lived in an area that the county was then divided and part of that county became another county, sometimes a person didn't move, but their county and census records kept changing. And it's because the counties kept changing. The population grew, and so they made smaller counties. So keep that in mind. You want to know when a county changed for the time period that you're looking at, because you want to be looking in the correct county. But going to a county is not always a reasonable thing, right? You might live on the other side of the United States or even in another country. So one of the things that you can do is find a lot of deeds online. Now, my go-to place for finding deeds is FamilySearch. And I'm going to go into detail on those records and how you look at them and things like that. But I want to give you a couple of other options as well. One other place that you can look is on just a simple Google, let me say that. Just a simple Google, I can't say that. Just a simple Google search. There we go. And that is by just typing in the name of the county and state and then online land records. And that can help you find these records that may not be on FamilySearch. Another place that you can look that does have quite a few deeds is Ancestry. The way that they're sorted on Ancestry, they're not in a complete book. And I find that it's sometimes harder for me. Let me show you what you can find on Ancestry. Here we have the land records database on Ancestry. It includes probate, wills, tax, and land records, and even criminal records. So I'm not saying don't look at this. It's a great place to go. But a lot of times I end up going to FamilySearch too, because a lot of times they've gotten their information from FamilySearch anyway. Not always, but sometimes. I'd like to also point over here that they also have on Ancestry, they have U.S. General Land Office records. They have bounty land warrants. So these were some of those grants that we were talking about. The General Land Office records are grants. The bounty land warrants are grants. That's military service. And then there's some other maps and other information here that may be of interest to you. So this is a great place to go. And sometimes less is more. Sometimes you want to just type in the last name. And then a time period and particularly a county. And a lot of times I'll do a search by county or surrounding counties. So that's Ancestry. Now let me take you into FamilySearch. So first you're going to type in the state. So I'm going to type in Virginia. And then I'm going to start typing the county. And you'll see that it popped up here. So I'm just going to select that and click search. And then this takes me to that page I was on a moment ago. And I'm going to go down here and I'm going to go down. There's so many great records in here, but we're just going to go to land and property. So they have quite a few. They have 16 different things. But what I do is I go down. I want to see what the county has. Some of these are books that people have that, were helpful, especially when we were in the days of microfilm, but FamilySearch has worked really hard to provide these records to the public if they are allowed by the agreement that they have with whomever they microfilm the records from. And so I would prefer to just go to the county source. So here I'm at the county clerk, Albemarle County, Virginia, deeds and general index. So you'll see here that this just kind of gives you some information on where the deed came from. A microfilm of original records of the Albemarle County Courthouse in Charlottesville, Virginia. Some pages are dark or faded or hard to read. I want to point out a couple of things here to you, and it's kind of unusual to see this on one page. Usually they're all either one way or they're all another. But if you see a camera like that, that means you can look at the image. Like you were looking at microfilm that we did years ago. If you see the little key here, that means that because of when they microfilmed it, there are restrictions. And so it's viewable, but you have to view it at a family history library. And if I were to click on it, it's going to tell me to view these images, do one of the following. Access the site at a family history center or a FamilySearch affiliate library. And if you click on these, that'll take you to the site you need to go, and you can put in your information on where you live and they'll show you where the nearest one is, which is super helpful. So I'm going to go back here. Different counties organize their indexes differently. This is a general index. And some will have a grantor index and a grantee index. Now the grantor is the person that is selling it and the grantee is the person that is buying it. So let me show you this general index from 1748 to 1859. I'm going to click on the camera and I've got a ton of little images. And so I'm just going to go down here and pick one, double click on it to make it larger, and over here on the side I can blow it up even more. This is a true general index in that it has the from and the to all together, which is great. I actually love these. These are wonderful, but not every place did them. So this shows that John Carter purchased land from Robert Fields. And then this gives you the type of instrument, and which can be helpful. Here we have a mortgage, here we have a trust, a release, but they tell you the book and the page number. So, and then we see that John Carter, and this gave me the year over here. Now, every book can be different. Sometimes the year's over on this side. And So you just have to read the information. So this says in 1774, John Carter purchased land from Robert Fields. In 1779, he sold some to Henry Carter Jr. And then in 1803, he sold some to Whitaker Carter. So, and this was a release. So the fact that these two guys have the same name, you know what? They might be family members. So I can then look at the book and the page number and find the information that I'm looking for. I want to remind you that what you're doing here is basically looking through a book. So if I click on here or click on here, I can just turn the page and I can see the next page and the next page, and I'm just flipping the pages of a book. But if I go here to this little thing right here, I can see multiple images. And when you're in doubt, go to the beginning of the book. So here we have Abraham Allen provided a gift to Micajah Allen. And this was in 1765. It's a gift. It's in book 4, page 82. Let's check that one out. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to look at deed book 4. So it's going to be right in here. Now here, this is deed book 2. Okay? So I'm going to have to look through these images. So I'm going to make them a little bit smaller, and I'm going to look for, because they're going to have a beginning and an end of every book. So this one says continued, but now we have a new beginning. So let's see what this one is. Here's deed book 3, but I want deed book 4. So let's keep going. Here we go. We've got deed book 4 right there. All right. So now, a lot of times at the front of the deed book, they have another index, which is a great thing if you want to look at that again. But I'm not going to take the time to do that right now. Here's page 1, and I know this deed that I'm interested in was on page 82. So there's 2 pages to an image. So half of 82 is 41. So that takes me to around 515. I don't know. We'll give that a shot. So I'm going to look at 515. So look at that. We landed right on page 82 where we wanted to be. So I'm going to zoom this in a little bit. And this writing is tough. But here we have, to all Christian people to whom this present writing shall come. A lot of times when you see an F like that, it's 2 S's. I, Abraham Allen of Albemarle County. See here, this is telling you where he lives at the time that he's doing this. Sendeth greeting, know ye that I, the said Abraham Allen, for diverse good causes and valuable consideration, more especially for the love and goodwill, I bear my son, Micajah Allen of Albemarle County, 390 acres of land, lying, and then they describe it. Now, land descriptions have changed over the years, and those could be separate presentations. So if I'm a relative of Micajah Allen and I'm not sure who his father is, now I am. I know that his father is Abraham Allen and that he owned land in this particular location. Voila. So let me show you a couple of other types of deed records. This is Oklahoma County, Oklahoma. And here we have, like we were talking before, we have grantor indexes and grantee indexes. So you want to be checking both of those. So it's not going to be quite as quick. So let's look at a grantee index. So this is 1890 to 1906. And I am just going to go somewhere in here. And it very clearly at the top says grantee index. And in this one, it's organized a little differently. We have the grantee, we have the grantor, we have the date of filing, and then we have the date of the instrument. And sometimes those dates can be very different. Sometimes people held on to a bill of sale, so to speak, but didn't record it with the court for quite a few years. So you do want to be looking beyond the time period that you're thinking, because maybe the person that purchased the property didn't file it with the court right away. So, and usually these are sequential by year when you see them in the index of filing, not of the date of the instrument. Here we have what kind it was. Here we have what book it's on, what page it's on, and then a very difficult to read kind of description of the land. Different kind of index. All right, here's another one from Fairfield County, South Carolina. In this we have a direct and an indirect index. Now this is the same as grantor and grantee. Direct means the grantor, and indirect means the grantee, meaning direct is the person that sold it, and indirect is the person that bought it. So let's take a look at this direct deed index, surnames A to B. Now this is a little bit different, right? This has a time period, 1842, but it does the surnames in different categories. So if I was looking for a surname M, I would be looking here. Let's look at that. Here we have something that looks quite a bit different. So let's go to this page here where we've got more typewritten information. Wow, this looks very different, doesn't it? We have a surname of Mobley, and then we have these different given name slots, and then we have the grantee, the person that purchased it, the book that it can be found in, the page, the year of the instrument, and the year of recording. See, this one was in 1852, and it was recorded in 53. Here's 1849, 1855. So things to be taking into consideration. I'd like to point out here that at the very beginning of this book, they go over these sub-indexes. And so it's something that you want to be looking at. The names are grouped in how they are similar in sound, not necessarily by alphabetical order. And so then they talk about this sub-index. And if I go to this next page, I'm getting the sub-index for these different sounds. So Mic-A, right? Or Mic-B. And so, but if I go to the next page, do you see how they've organized it? So you can look at this list based on what your name is. And again, be generous with the way your name may sound. So sometimes this is really helpful because maybe your family name was written down a little bit differently and you might be able to find it better through an index like this. To go back to this first page now of this index, this isn't alphabetical, is it? The first one is Mobley. You'd think that the first one would be a Mic or an MA, but it's not. So that's why that sub-index at the front is so important. So let me go back here to this picture, and this is 1, but if we look at the next one, the next page is 2. But watch this. Then the next page is still 2. You can have like 5 page 2s or 5 page 6s or whatever. So I want to show you another one because they can even be more confusing. Here we have Delaware County. Which one is this? Delaware County, Pennsylvania. And so here's the outside of the book. This is a grantor index beginning from the beginning of the county to 1914. I've got this up here at the top. So, and this page is really hard to read on this side, but over here we can read it better. We see Alice Ash and then Adeline Aldridge. So this isn't alphabetical by surname. This has the A's in one area, and then it's organized by their given name. And up here at the top is a listing of where you can find the given name. So A is on 2 right here. B starts on 32. Does that make sense? So I went forward 40 images and I was all the way to 128. And here we see that 128 is H. So here we have Hannah with a surname that starts with an A. So this index is completely different than the one we looked at before. Now I'm going to give you another one that even can be a little bit more confusing. So this is a general index book, and you'll see by the key at the top of the page that you're going to need to know the given name, and then you have the first initial of this is their surname. So on page 208, we'll look at this index because that's what page we're on. It just kind of popped into the middle. We're at a given name of A and B, starting with A or B, and a surname starting with P and Q. Let's see what we got here. Here we have Anna Fair or Albert Paulson. Let's make it even a little bit more complicated here. I am saving you the best for last. The Russell Index System. So in the Russell Index System, and it's kind of crazy, you'll a lot of times see this key somewhere on the book or at the top of a page. This means it's Russell. And let me go in and we'll go to the first page, and you really need to look at the information at the beginning so that you can see. The Russell Index System goes by the surname, but it goes by the surname in a weird way. And it tells you here. So here we have the A's. So they want to know what sound is after the A of the first letter of a last name. Is it L, M, N, R, or T? And then it gets even more specific. So here we have A-L. So it's all house would be here. But also Ashley, because we don't care about S and H. We only care about L, M, N, R, and T. And so here we have L-M, Almer, okay? Allen, L-N, all right? It's not easy. So you have to take your time. Here we have Appleton, because we don't care about the P's. We care about the A and the L and the T. All right, and then if I go to the next page, we'll see the M. So here we have the A-M's, A-M-N. Get it? Maybe. And then this tells you what page to look at in the index book. So then if I zoom back out, and then I'm going to, like I did on the other books, and then I'm going to start going to the pages. So this is page 6. So if whatever name I was looking for, it said page 6, I'm going to find him here. And here we're going to see that we have grantors, the family name of Albus, first name of Frank. And again, we have different columns for different names, so don't let that mess you up. So if it's an M-N-O-P-Q-R-S, they're going to be here. And then we have their grantee, their record, volume, book, and page number, the date of recording. They're not even making a notation of the date of the instrument, just the date of recording, the location of where the book is, what kind of book it is. The rest of the system is really my least favorite. But you got to understand them so that when you're looking at your deeds, you know where to find them. FamilySearch developed some technology that allows artificial intelligence, or AI, to read every word in handwritten documents. Now, that's a big feat. What it does is it allows you to search. It makes indexed every word in the document. How is that so important? Well, there's lots of times when people are a witness to a will or a deed that places them in a particular time and place, but you're never going to find their name on any index that you're looking at. They're not indexed. And sometimes you might have a deed where one of the parties is indexed as the seller or the buyer, but it might say on the deed index at all, which means there's more people involved in this deed, and they're not on that index usually either. So you may not know. In addition, full text searching can help you find people in places that maybe you weren't expecting. So let me tell you how to get into full text searching. Go into FamilySearch. You do need to have an account, but it's free. And then you scroll down, and on the right-hand side, you will see FamilySearch Labs right here. And then you want to view these experiments. Now, the name alone ought to clue you into the fact that this is a lab, this is an experiment, this is something that they're still working on. Then you scroll down. If you haven't ever looked at it before, you're going to be seeing that bar here. Try it. I have already looked at it, so it's telling me to turn it off if I don't ever want to use it again. But I'm going to go to the experiment, or I would try it if I'm new to it. The name spellings of people are sometimes difficult. And sometimes you may search for somebody, and you may search in a very thorough way, but you still may not find them. So one thing that I would caution you to do, if you're not finding something that maybe you're expecting to find, I would recommend that you go to the catalog, the FamilySearch catalog under search, and look in the particular area and look actually in the deed book or the will book's index. Because sometimes looking at the index, you will see something kind of crazy that will jump out at you that you would have never found with a search. And by looking at the index and seeing how they spelt somebody's name, it can help you recognize maybe something that you may have missed. FamilySearch has been rolling this out slowly through the record sets that they have. It's not going to search everything that they have, only certain record groups. Now, I wanted to redo a section of this full text searching part because it's changed since I did the original video. And you still get to it through the FamilySearch Labs, but you'll see that there's some different options for how you can start your search. They actually give you the option for a keyword, a name, place, year, and even an image group number. So if you want to search within a particular image group, then that would be really helpful. And that's where going to the catalog, like we talked about earlier, and finding those image group numbers could be really helpful for you. Then you're narrowing your search down to a particular image group. Now, with full text searching, though, less tends to be more. And I've also noticed, by the way, that sometimes I try something in the name field and it's not as effective as if I put it in the keywords. I'm just going to search for the keywords carding Jackson to start with. Now I have this sidebar here. And if you haven't seen it, this is another great addition. They walk you through it. Because I don't know about you, but sometimes I get into something like this and I kind of forget, how do I do this? And how do I use that Boolean thing that I heard about, and how is best to use this record group? And they kind of give you these tips right here as a reminder. To reduce the number of search results, use filters on this upper left-hand corner right here. The collection, the record year, the record type, or the record place. We'll talk more about that in a minute. You can find an exact word or phrase. We talked about that before by putting them in with quotation marks. So that's a Boolean operator. You can use a specific word or phrase with the plus symbol. For instance, you can make sure that it includes Judith. Or if you want to exclude something, you can have a minus. Don't put a space between the plus or the minus and whatever you want to include or not include. Now, two of the other ones that I really love that sometimes people will forget, what was what again? And this tells you right here. If you use the question symbol, they don't really say this here, but that's going to take the place of one letter. So if you have a Jensen that may be spelled Jensen or Jenson or even Jensan, all of those will be returned by that spelling. And if you want to have multiple letters, then you can use the star. In their example here, they have car star. You can put the star before something. You can put it after something. It's wonderful. You can use the question mark in part of the name and the star. For instance, my maiden name is Stevenson. Sometimes people spelled it Stevenson. I could put the question mark there, but what about if somebody has spelled it Stephenson or Sen? I can spell it Ste star S question mark N. That will give me spellings for all of those different variations of Stevenson. I love that they have included this now as a reminder because these things are really important. Not only because their name may have been spelled differently in the document, but because the AI may not have recognized a letter correctly, and it may help you find something that was incorrectly recognized within the AI. You see, I have some results of carding in Rutland County, Vermont, which is where he was married. And then I have a carding, but this isn't carding Jackson. This isn't my guy. I have more carding that's not my carding Jackson. Here I have something in Broome County, New York. So let's look at, and these are either showing up as carding Jackson or Jackson carding. So let's experiment. Let's put the quotation marks on either side of his name and let's search. Now I'm seeing only his name in order carding Jackson. And I'm seeing a deed in 1843 and 1844. I would also want to search by, quote, Jackson carding. Now I'm finding these types of results, okay, where his name was flipped. A lot of these are deed indexes. Now here we're seeing carding wool, okay? So let's get rid of that. I want to put carding Jackson here, and I want to take away the name wool. Now I'm not seeing the results for carding wool. So now I'm back to just my general search of carding Jackson, and I want to talk about some of these filters. Now, with the name in quotations, I only have 62 results, which is very doable. All right, so now let's look at if I filtered that by collection though. So I'm going to select Vermont and I'm going to apply that. And now I'm going to go back into the collection again and I'm going to select New York and I'm going to apply that. You can see it's added both those collections. And then I'm going to also select Illinois. Now I have the 3 places that I know he lived in, all right? And this is only 47 results. All right, so I can take a look at those if I wanted to look at those. Now, let's say I wanted to narrow it down by record year. I have 46 in 1800 and 1 in 1900. But in other instances, this may be crucial in narrowing down my search results. I can narrow it down by record type. And then here I can search by record place. And here I can even narrow it down further. So in New York, let's see, we have a bunch in Broome and some in a different county. Well, this isn't the county that my guy lived in. He lived in Broome County. So I can apply that and narrow down those New York deeds even further to just Broome County. Now I'm only at 36 results. Now here is an interesting deed that I see in Broome County, New York of an Abel W. Jackson and Lorinda Jackson and then a Carding Jackson. So let's take a look at this one. Now let's talk a little bit about how this works in the full text searching. You'll see the words that they've found highlighted here. That can help you find them in the text. But you also have a transcription of the text. And you can see where sometimes they skip words and things like that. This is not going to be an absolute transcription. But if you want to take a transcription and insert it into something, you can download the transcription right here or copy it, and then you can paste it somewhere. Now within the transcription, the keywords are highlighted as well. Now if I want to remove those keywords and not show them in the document, or show them down here, I can do that right there. I can toggle this off and on. Now this is a transcription not of the entire deed, but just of this page. Now if I want to download the page, I can download it right here. If I want to adjust the image, I can increase the brightness or contrast or invert it so that it's black with white writing. Now if I want to open that up again, I just click that little thing right there, and that will open this up again for me. I'm going to go to the next page on this side. So I'm going to use that little arrow and see the document on the other page. It maintained my zoom. Let's zoom back out a little bit right here by doing the minus. This deed was done in February 1837 between Abel W. Jackson and Dorinda Jackson, his wife. But Carding Jackson was their attorney. And this is in the area where he lived. I would assume there's a familiar relationship here. So now I have possibly a brother, a father, or a cousin. So this has opened up my Carding Jackson for me. Yay! Now I obviously love this stuff. I actually really like solving a mystery through an unexpected record. And it's like gold. When you find it, it's just like, oh, party. It's so exciting. And this is actually really fun research to do. So once you learn the techniques on how to do it, you're going to be addicted. This is my first step. These are the things that I do first. Now, if I strike out here and I need to dig deeper, there's all kinds of places that you can go. You can go to local county historical societies or genealogical societies for records. You want to look into more of those records that we saw in the FamilySearch catalog, and that can include tax records, vital records. You want to look at city records. Sometimes cities kept vital records. And so even, before the time of birth certificates or death certificates. So you want to be kind of dotting all your I's and crossing off your T's. You want to look for cemetery records if they exist. You want to be looking for church records. You want to look for marriage, births, christenings, death records, burial records. Those all can be held on church levels. There's so many different types of records that can help you solve your problems if you've not found the answers that you need in these records. And again, like I mentioned before, you want to be building all of these families. So you're going to know all of the individuals that resided in this county during this time period by the surname that you're researching. And you're going to be the expert on the Milloway family or the Smith family or whatever family that you're researching. You want to be able to break them into family groups and know all about them, okay? That's going to help you do exhaustive research, and that's what you want to be doing. You want to be doing reasonably exhaustive research, which means trying to find all of the records that you can. Can you find everything? Probably not. And maybe it's going to take a visit to the location, but at least you have a starting point, and at least then if you visit the location, you know all of the specifics about the families that resided there, and as you're encountering further information, you can put it in its proper place. Now, again, like I mentioned before, I do have a handout for this video that goes into some of this into a little bit more detail and kind of gives you like everything that we've talked about so that you don't have to try to take copious notes. So I hope this has helped. If you've had success and if you found the answers that you're looking for in an obscure record, put it in the comments, share it with everybody else. If this video helps you out, please tell us about it. Tell us about what you discovered. And if this has been helpful to you, please give it a like so that other people know this content was valuable in helping you become a better genealogist.